Podcast. I'm your host, AB.
And this week on Mama Murdered a Podcast, we're covering a case that you'll probably remember. And if you don't remember it, then you may remember it for a completely different reason. And that would probably be the fact that the murderer of this victim was being interviewed by a local news station when he learned that her body had been discovered, and his entire reaction was caught on camera. This is one of those cases that has kind of always stuck with me just because it is absolutely mind-boggling to see how the brain of a killer works. So this week we're diving into the case of a Mercer College student named Lauren Giddings. So with all that being said and without further ado, let's get it. Lauren Giddings was born on April 18th in 1984. She was born to her parents Bill and Karen Giddings. Lauren grew up and lived primarily in Maryland with her parents and her two younger sisters, Caitlin and Sarah. And she lived in Maryland with her parents and her siblings until she was old enough to move out and attend college. But before Lauren was old enough to attend college, and while she was growing up, she attended a Catholic school and graduated from high school where she played field hockey and softball. Lauren was super ambitious, she was driven, she was motivated, and she knew exactly what she wanted out of life. She wanted a career where she could help people every single day as her job. You just don't find that very often. And in 2002, Lauren decided that she wanted to make the move from Maryland to Georgia to attend Angus Scott University. And this move actually seemed to be like a perfect fit for Lauren. She kind of welcomed the Southern hospitality, and she would end up falling completely in love with Georgia after her move. Lauren attended Angus Scott University, where she still played softball, and she attended that school from 2002 until 2006, when she graduated with a major in political science, and she minored in religious studies. So she's already doing the damn thing, because graduating from university is never a small task. It's always like a really huge accomplishment. But Lauren's family and friends were exceptionally proud of her just because she was the first person in her entire family to attend college. But she wasn't done just yet. Lauren had already graduated with her first 2 degrees in 2006, but then in 2008 she decided that she also wanted to go to law school. Because why not? And law school is like a job in itself, or so I've heard. I'm not speaking from experience, obviously. But Lauren didn't just want to be a lawyer, though. She wanted to be a public defender. So I feel like that kind of shows how she really did just want to help people at work every single day, and that was her job. Lauren is the kind of impressive that we all hope our kids will be one day, but she was actually doing it. And during her time at college, Lauren had started dating a man by the name of David Vanderveer. Lauren and David met at a law office that David worked at when Lauren got an internship as a project assistant in the same law office. And I'm only going to mention their age difference because if you look into this case on your own, you're probably going to see it and notice it too, because David was about 20 years older than Lauren at the time. Well, I guess technically he would have been 20 years older than her all of the time, but either way, regardless, they were both adults, so let's keep it moving. So Lauren decided to attend law school at Mercer University, which was also in Georgia, which was actually in Macon, Georgia, if we're being exact. She had really fallen in love with the state of Georgia, and she would often be seen with her little fluffy dog, Butterbean. And if that is not the cutest dog name that I've ever heard, then I don't know what is. And it was even kind of joked about amongst Lauren's friends and family that she would be the next Elle Woods from the movie Legally Blonde, because she was a law student with a tiny dog that she carried around and took with her everywhere. And also because Lauren was blonde and always spotted in something pink. So she's definitely given Elle Woods vibes. And Lauren lived in an apartment complex in Barrister's Hall. That complex was specifically for law students who were attending Mercer University. It wasn't on college campus. It was just an apartment complex that was right across the street from the college. And Lauren was the type that took her studies extremely seriously. So for the next few years, Lauren went to classes, studied her ass off, until May of 2011, when she finally graduated from law school with a Juris Doctorate degree, which I've also heard called just a JD degree. But as we all know, you don't just get to pass law school and then bam, you're a lawyer now. No, you actually have to pass the bar exam, which then this got me wondering, what happens if you do all of those years of schooling and then you don't pass the bar exam? Like, then what? Did you just waste like 5 or more years of your life doing school? I don't know. I didn't look it up because I have no desire to become a lawyer, but you know that would have to suck if you can't retake it. I'm so off topic. Let me figure out what I was even talking about. Okay, so Lauren had gotten her Juris Doctorate degree and she was about to start prepping to take the bar exam. And if you're like me and you've ever wondered what the bar exam consisted of, then let me fill you in because I looked it up. And after I did, it sounds to me like my literal anxiety-having ass's worst nightmare. It's typically a 2-day long test, which covers multiple choice questions, essay questions, and even a performance test. So this test is absolutely no joke, especially once I started looking into what a performance test even was. And a performance exam would consist of writing an affidavit or like maybe drafting a settlement letter offer to opposing counsel. Again, this sounds like my worst nightmare, but Lauren had come this far and she wasn't going to stop now. This would have been her last and final step that she would have needed to do in order to officially be certified to practice law. And again, I don't know much about becoming a lawyer or being a law student, but what I do know is that most law students just kind of have to immerse themselves in their studies in the weeks leading up to the bar exam. And that usually includes just kind of locking themselves in their room, turning off their phones, and only taking breaks from studying for long enough to eat, sleep, and use the restroom. And that was exactly what Lauren was planning on doing. This wasn't something that would have been out of the usual for Lauren either, though, because she had done this for big tests or exams before. But Lauren had always been really good about letting her friends and family know when she would kind of be off the grid studying so that they would know that they wouldn't hear from her as often, so that they wouldn't worry. And her family and friends understood that. They knew that that meant that she would be nose deep into a study book and that she wouldn't be doing much of anything else.
They are the crimes that haunt families.
It still hurts to know that our young brother just disappeared. Where is he? What happened to him? Did he suffer?
You can listen to Cold Case Western Australia wherever you get your podcasts or by visiting the WA Police Force website.
Everyone knew how important this exam was to Lauren, and they knew that she was taking it seriously, so this wasn't unheard of. But before she took the bar exam, Lauren made a trip back to Maryland so that she could be the maid of honor for her younger sister, Caitlin's wedding. And this was something that Lauren had been looking forward to and something that she was excited about. Not only did she get to be back home visiting with her friends and family, but she was also going to be able to watch her little sister get married on June 17th, 2011. And after the wedding, Lauren headed back to Georgia to start studying for the bar exam, and when she left from her family, she told them that this would be one of those times where she shut herself in her apartment and just hardcore studied. But before that, on June 24th, 2011, which was a Friday night, Lauren went out on the town with her friends before everyone started, cramming for the bar exam. They were all just drinking and celebrating the fact that they had all graduated, and also celebrating the fact that they only had one more big test to pass, and then they would be done with schooling. No one had really started studying too seriously for the bar exam yet, so this was just in time for them to blow off steam, which I'm sure they all needed. They all deserved a break to just kind of cut loose because, they're in law school. That cannot be just a walk through the park. And while they were all out drinking and hanging out, Lauren had mentioned to her friends that she thought that someone may be stalking her. And this kind of made me wonder why her friends didn't take this claim a little more seriously, especially since they were all in law school. They all know that stalking is a pretty serious claim and that it's something that most people don't just say out of nowhere. So I started digging into that a little bit, and it seems like her friends knew that Lauren got a lot of attention from men and that they all just kind of assumed that she was exaggerating and just kind of using the term stalking loosely, which makes sense. Hell, I've made a joke about someone stalking me before just because I run into the same person at the grocery store or the gas station 2 days in a row. So I can easily see how Lauren's friends could have come to that conclusion. But sadly, Lauren wasn't exaggerating. She was being stalked, but I don't even think that Lauren realized to what extent she was being stalked and watched. Now, before we go any further, something to mention is that Lauren and her boyfriend David were kind of in one of those off-again, on-again types of relationships. And during one of the times that they were broken up, Lauren had started dating a guy in her friend group named Joe. And Joe is actually roommates with one of Lauren's really good friends whose name is Ashley. So Ashley and Joe live together, they're both friends with Lauren, they're all in the same friend group. Now, both Joe and Ashley were out with this group of friends on the 24th when Lauren had gone out to have drinks with her friends and cut loose before she started studying. And Joe was actually one of the people that Lauren had told, like, hey, I think someone may be stalking me. But again, this isn't something that her friends really took seriously. They really just thought that there was a guy who was maybe trying to talk Lauren into going out with him, and she had said no, and maybe he'd asked multiple times, and so she was like, oh, this guy's been stalking me, just trying to go out with her. Because I really feel like if Lauren's friends really honestly and truly thought that she was being stalked, then they would have taken this more seriously. When it's even a little more weird because Lauren's sister remembered that sometime before her death, Lauren had gone home to Maryland where her parents and siblings still lived, and she had mentioned to one of her sisters that she thought someone had broken into her apartment. Because Lauren had said that she'd come home on more than one occasion and that she'd noticed that things were moved around inside of her apartment, and not even necessarily that things had been stolen or taken, but just that her things weren't where she had left them or they weren't where they typically go. But there really wasn't anything else that I could find that was said or done about that. So I'm not sure about the breaking into the apartment. Now, after this night out with friends, when no one had heard or seen from Lauren, it wasn't really alarming at first. Because of course her family and friends were kind of working under the assumption that she had probably just locked herself in her apartment to study for the bar exam like she'd planned. But after quite a few days of nobody hearing from Lauren and Lauren not responding to anybody's missed calls or text, this is when a childhood and lifelong friend of Lauren's had tried reaching out to her about something relatively important. And she still wasn't getting a response from Lauren. And this is when the first red flag went up about the fact that no one had spoken or heard from Lauren in a few days. Not her family, not her friends, not her boyfriend, no one. And it was on June 29th of 2011 when Lauren's lifelong friend realized that she hadn't been able to get a response out of Lauren for even super important stuff. So this same friend reached out to Laura's other close friends, and she learned that none of them had heard from Lauren either. Which was weird, because Lauren was pretty good about keeping in touch with her close friends and family, even when she was doing a hardcore study session. So this was Wednesday, June 29th, 2011, and the last time that Lauren had been out and about and seen by any of her friends was when she was out with the group on the 24th. Well, I guess it would technically have been the 25th when somebody last saw her, because after the night out of drinking with her friends, Lauren had actually spent the night with her friend Ashley, who, remember, was roommates with Joe, and Joe is the man that Lauren had dated during one of the times that she and David had broken things off. Try to keep up. So, Lauren had actually slept in Joe's room on the night of the 24th when she'd slept over at Ashley's place after they had gone out for drinks. Now, even though Lauren and David were still dating, she stayed in Joe's room that night. And this is never clarified if she and Joe did anything, and honestly, it doesn't matter who slept in whose bed or what they did, because regardless, all we really need to know is that she did sleep in Joe's room. Whether they did or didn't sleep in the same bed or whatever, that's none of our business. So Joe was one of the last people that actually saw Lauren alive, because by the time everybody else got up that night when they all stayed at Ashley's house after they went out drinking, Lauren was already gone when everybody had gotten up. But Joe did say that he saw Lauren leave. So now that all of her friend group and her family are talking and connecting, everybody's starting to notice that no one has seen or heard from Lauren. They're still calling other friends, and Lauren's lifelong friend even reached out to Lauren's sister Caitlin, the one who had just gotten married, and she hadn't heard from Lauren either. So at this point, Lauren's friends and family were just kind of reaching out to everybody that they could think of, just to see if anyone had maybe heard from her. And still nobody had seen or heard from her since Joe last saw Lauren leaving Ashley's place, and that was on the morning of the 25th. And again, everybody's kind of realizing that they haven't seen or spoken to Lauren on the 29th. So that's a good 4.5 days. But everybody did know that Lauren had been planning on doing some deep studying. But once they all got back in touch and they realized that absolutely no one had heard from Lauren, that's when everybody kind of started to worry. Because yes, she was planning to kind of shut out the outside world to study, but not to this extent. Lauren's sister Caitlin knew that Lauren's friend Ashley either had a spare key to her apartment or she knew where Lauren kept her spare key. So Caitlin asked Ashley to just go get the key and go inside of Lauren's apartment and just check and take a look around. And as soon as Ashley pulled into Lauren's apartment complex, she immediately noticed that Lauren's car was still in the parking lot, which would signal that Lauren was home. But when Ashley knocked on the door, no one came to the door, and there was no movement or sign of anybody being inside the apartment. So Ashley used her key and she got inside of Lauren's apartment. But when she got inside, that's when she started to worry even more. All of Lauren's law books, study guides, and class notes, they were all still sprawled out all over the place. So if Lauren had decided to maybe go to the library and study, then she would have taken all of her books and notes with her. But all of those things that Lauren would have used to study were still inside of her apartment. Her laptop was still left inside of her apartment, which is another thing that she would have used to study. Lauren's phone, keys, wallet, and purse were all still inside of her apartment, but there was no sign of forced entry and no sign of a struggle that anybody could see. It honestly looked like Lauren had just been inside of her apartment studying 1 minute, and then she was gone the next. And we all know that none of us are leaving our house without those 3 main things: phone, wallet, car keys. We may walk out and leave our chapstick, our water bottle, but we're not leaving our phone, our wallet, or our keys. And if you really think about it, like, what viable possibilities are there for Lauren to have left her apartment on her own free will? She likely wouldn't get far without her car keys unless she'd planned to take public transportation, which I don't know why you would do that if you have a car. But I'm also a country bumpkin who forgets that big cities even exist. But even if she had taken public transportation, which would kind of take the car keys out of the equation, Lauren would still need her keys in order to lock her apartment up, which she would have done, especially considering the fact that she was convinced that somebody had been coming inside of her apartment when she wasn't home. And she would also likely need her wallet in order to buy anything while she was out, including a ticket or a pass to whatever public transportation was available in Macon, Georgia at the time. And she also wouldn't have left her cell phone. This was 2011, and while people weren't as glued to their phones as they are now, most people did always have their phones on them. But all of those things were still inside of Lauren's apartment, so where could she have gone without any of those things? Now, if I'm not mistaken, Ashley had taken her boyfriend and another friend to Lauren's apartment to kind of look around with her. And once they looked around and saw all the stuff that had been left behind, they noticed that Lauren's phone was laying on the bed. When they checked it, the phone was dead. So somebody plugged it in to the charger, and that's when they realized that there hadn't even been any activity on Lauren's phone since the 25th. And if you'll remember, the 25th was the day after Lauren had gone out drinking with her friends and stayed over at Ashley's place in John's room. Not John, Joe. So that had been 4 days of no phone activity, no social media activity, and 4 days of not getting in touch with anyone that Lauren spoke to on a daily basis. Now, while Ashley is with another few friends and they're looking inside of the apartment, a neighbor kind of peeked his head inside of the apartment and asked what was going on. This neighbor was Stephen McDaniel, and all of Lauren's friends thought that it was kind of weird that Stephen had even shown up. It wasn't like he and Lauren were friends, and their entire friend group all agreed that it was kind of awkward having him there. But Stephen did live in the same apartment complex, and he did live relatively close by to Lauren, and he also went to Mercer with Lauren. He'd also graduated with Lauren's class, and he was also in the Federalist Society with Lauren. Actually, in the Federalist Society, Lauren had been named president, and Stephen had been named vice president. And Lauren and Stephen had even more in common than that, because Lauren and Stephen had actually moved into that apartment complex where they both lived in the same week as one another. And the two had also been neighbors for about 3 years at this point, so while Stephen and Lauren weren't really what you might call friends, they did know each other. They were acquaintances, so Lauren's friends just kind of let it go. And after this, Lauren's sister Caitlin decided to check on all of Lauren's social media accounts, because Lauren was super active on her social media pages, and Caitlin had all of her passwords. But once she logged in, she saw that Lauren hadn't posted anything on any of her social media pages in days. And on top of that, Lauren's boyfriend David also hadn't heard anything from her either. But David was also out of state in California for a golfing trip, and he hadn't spoke to Lauren in days. However, he had gotten an email from Lauren on the 25th of June, and the email was so weird and out of the usual that David didn't even respond to the email that she'd sent. Because in the email that Lauren sent to David, which was kind of the last known email that she sent to anyone ever, Lauren was explaining to David how she thought that someone had tried to break into her apartment the night before when she'd gone out drinking with her friends and stayed at Ashley's place afterwards. So it seems like Lauren came home on the 25th, which would have been the morning after she'd gone out drinking with her friends, and she either noticed something out of place or noticed something that she hadn't been the one to do. This is when Lauren's sister Caitlin finally got in touch with police to file a missing persons report. But what Caitlin didn't realize is that Lauren's friends back in Georgia had already gotten in touch with the police. And Lauren's friends had already filed a missing persons report. So Lauren's sister in Maryland was contacting police just shortly after Lauren's friends in Georgia had also contacted police. Which I feel like that just kind of shows how many people cared and loved about Lauren, and she had people in multiple states notice that she was missing, and they were all trying to get in touch with police at the same time. Now, Macon police officers came out and they searched Lauren's apartment a little after midnight, which I guess technically would have made the date June 30th since it was after midnight when they showed up. So, while Macon police officers came out and searched through Lauren's apartment, Lauren's friend Ashley and her friends that she'd brought with her had kind of been walking around to places within walking distance that Lauren may have possibly gone to. But after searching the apartment, even police didn't see anything out of place. The officers also didn't see anything that showed signs of a forced entry or any signs of a struggle that may have taken place. Nothing was missing, nothing was broken, nothing was messed up. So after a few hours, a little after 3 a.m., Macon police officers couldn't find anything to suggest that Lauren had left on her own, or anything to suggest that she would be returning home soon. So they called in the big guns. Because there was just nothing in Lauren's apartment that would suggest that she'd left and that she'd be coming back soon. And of course, this left Lauren's friends and family feeling defeated and even frustrated with the lack of answers and what they'd found. Because even Macon police thought that it was a little weird that Lauren would have left her apartment without her purse, wallet, keys, and cell phone. So when they couldn't find anything to suggest where Lauren may have gone, and after they'd come to the conclusion that Lauren wouldn't have left without any of these things, Macon police called in the big guns, aka the crime scene detectives. And they called in the crime scene detectives to see if maybe they could find anything in Lauren's apartment that maybe police and Lauren's friends had just missed. Macon police were honestly just hoping that the crime scene detectives would find something that may have been overlooked that may help track Lauren down. And once crime scene detectives got to Lauren's apartment, they decided to check her entire apartment again. Just to be safe. Checking twice is always better than checking once, and it would also be with a fresh set of eyes looking at Lauren's apartment. But even the crime scene detectives didn't see or notice anything out of place or anything suspicious besides the obvious that Lauren's things were there and Lauren's car was there, but Lauren wasn't. And I think at one point, they were even bouncing theories off of one another. And if I'm not mistaken, the police and the crime scene detectives were kind of working with the theory that maybe Lauren had been abducted or taken against her will, and that maybe she hadn't been able to escape her captor or reach out for help. But between Macon police, the crime scene investigators, and the violent crimes unit all being out and searching not only Lauren's apartment, but also checking places that she was known to frequent, or places within walking distance that Lauren may have gone. But they were still coming up empty-handed. So, crime scene detectives decided to search Lauren's apartment a little bit more thoroughly, this time with luminol spray. Which, luminol spray is just a spray that crime scene detectives use to be able to see blood or bodily fluids that may have been wiped away or cleaned. So basically, luminol spray will show blood or bodily fluids under a black light, and the spray helps to see things that normally wouldn't be seen with the naked eye. Like, for instance, if someone cut their finger peeling apples in the kitchen, and then they sprayed it with bleach and wiped it up, and then the very next day they were murdered inside their bathroom, luminol spray would be able to see the blood that was cleaned up from peeling apples in the kitchen and being cut, but it would also show the blood from the bathroom where the murder had happened. Even if both blood spots had been cleaned thoroughly, even cleaned with bleach, it would still show up. So this is the method that the crime scene detectives decided to use because at this point, they had a sneaking suspicion that they may have either been looking for a missing persons, but they could potentially be looking for a body. And these are seasoned investigators. They knew right away that even though nothing looked out of place, that this was an extremely weird situation. They knew that Lauren wouldn't leave her apartment without any of her normal things that she would have taken with her. So luminol was sprayed in the living room, the door handles, and a few other places with no luck. But once they sprayed luminol spray in the bathroom, specifically in the bathtub in Lauren's apartment, one detective later remembered that the entire bathtub, quote, lit up like a Christmas tree, which would indicate that a massive amount of blood was in that tub at some point. And this just kind of solidified the fact that they may be looking for a body and not necessarily an alive missing person. And everyone was taking this case super seriously. Since Lauren was in law school, a lot of the law students were kind of friends with the people in the police department and the people that worked at the courthouse. And anybody that knew Lauren that worked at any of those types of places knew that she wouldn't run off and just worry everybody for shits and giggles. They knew that if no one had heard from Lauren, that something was wrong. Now, with the discovery of this massive amount of blood that had been found in Lauren's apartment, police wanted to interview people close by in the area, like neighbors and friends. But since graduation had already happened and it was over, the campus wasn't filled with students like it normally would have been, and the only people that were still on campus were students just like Lauren who would be studying for the bar exam. But police are talking to and interviewing anyone that they can, whether that be a friend or a neighbor or just somebody that may be able to help. And while some officers were doing that, other officers were gathered around out back of the apartment complex, presumably trying to figure out where to go from here. And that's when the wind kind of picked up speed and it was blowing a little harder than it had been earlier. And when the wind picked up, the officers out back at the apartment were hit with the smell of a decomposing human body. Now, every officer out there was familiar with that smell, and they all agree that that's something that's a very distinct smell and something that you immediately recognize after you smell it even just once. So, once the officers were hit with the smell, they kind of just followed the scent back to a dumpster that was outside of Lauren's apartment building. And these are the same dumpsters that the tenants at this apartment complex would have used to throw their trash away every day. And the trash truck would pick these dumpsters up about once a week and empty the dumpsters into the back of a trash truck, and it would be sent to a landfill. So when the officers got over to the dumpster and they lifted the lid, it was about 9:40 a.m. on June 30th that the officers saw something wrapped in a couple of thick black trash bags. Once the officers were able to get the black trash bag out of the dumpster, they were all stunned when they opened the bag and it was filled with a human torso. This torso didn't have the head, arms, or legs connected to it. It was just the torso of a white female. A white female that just so happened to have been found in the dumpsters that were specifically for the students that lived in this specific apartment complex that Lauren lived in. And the police had a feeling that this torso belonged to Lauren Giddings, but they wanted to confirm it with DNA before they called the family and before the news stations got a hold of it and the media took off with the story. So the officers were really trying to keep this hush-hush on the down low. Now, after this, the medical examiner was able to determine from the level of decomposition of the tissue samples that were taken from the torso that the time of death was sometime in between Saturday morning on June 25th to Sunday evening on June 26th. And the 25th would have been the morning after Lauren had gone out drinking with her friends, so that would have been the night of the 24th when she'd gone out. She'd spent the night at Ashley's place, but in Joe's room, and then the next morning on the 25th, Joe saw Lauren leave Ashley's place. And I do realize that I'm repeating these dates more than I should, probably. And I'm not just doing it to make it easier for you to keep up with. I'm also doing it for myself because my number dyslexia won't allow me to remember these dates without associating an event or place to them. So I'm doing this for all of our sake. Just work with me. So now the investigators have some sort of time of death to kind of work with. And now they need to kind of backtrack Lauren's movements to try to figure out where she was last seen, who she was last with, and where she had last been. Investigators start asking Lauren's friends about the weekend, and almost everyone recalled that the last time that they'd seen or heard from Laura was on the 24th when they'd all gone out drinking. And then investigators learned that Lauren had stayed the night in Joe's room, who, remember, was her ex-boyfriend, and Joe had seen Lauren leave his place on the morning of the 25th, sometime around 8 a.m. And again, the 25th would have been the morning after they'd gone out drinking. Now, the investigators learned that Joe and Lauren had actually dated before, so they immediately put him on the top of their suspect list, because why? Say it with me, the partner always did it. And they were thinking maybe this was some sort of revenge love thing gone wrong. But then investigators learned that it had actually been Lauren who had broken things off with Joe. And when officers go to speak to Joe, he tells them that Lauren did mention to him that she had planned to go to a country club in the area on the day of the 25th after she'd left his house that morning. So obviously investigators head straight to the country club to check the surveillance footage. And that's when they seen Lauren on camera ordering a drink next to the pool. And so as of now, everything Joe's saying is checking out. And finding out about Lauren going to the pool and then being able to confirm it on surveillance footage at the country club, this helped investigators narrow down Lauren's time of death even further, because before we had a time of death being estimated at the morning of the 25th through the evening of the 26th. So now that investigators have video proof of Lauren being alive and ordering a drink by the pool somewhere between noon and 1 p.m. on the 25th, that narrows it down to sometime after 1 p.m. on the 25th, then through the evening of the 26th, which is helpful information, especially in a murder investigation. Police also tracked down Lauren's last known location, and she was spotted on surveillance cameras at Zaxby's, which is a fast food chicken restaurant, on June 25th around 6:30 p.m. Which, this just narrowed down the time of death window even more, because Lauren was seen at the pool ordering a drink at the country club at 1 p.m. Then she was also seen later on that evening at 6:30 at the chicken spot. So that would then narrow down the time of death window to sometime after 6:30 p.m. on the 25th, and then through the evening of the 26th, which again is super helpful. So Joe had been fully cooperative, and he answered all the questions that the investigators had. And he was pretty quickly and pretty easily ruled out. So the next most obvious suspect to check in with would be Lauren's boyfriend David, because why? Say it with me, the partner always did it. But that's actually not true at all in this case. Because once police spoke with David, they learned that he had been in California during the time of Lauren's murder because, remember, he was out of state on this golfing trip in California. And when investigators asked if David could provide them with receipts for his time in California, he was able to do that fairly easily because he had been in California from Friday morning until Monday morning. So David is not at all a viable suspect after finding out this information and then fact-checking it, making sure that it was all true. However, it is worth mentioning that David did say that for the entire time that he was gone, that he didn't speak to Lauren at all. Like, not even once. So from Friday morning all the way till Monday morning, David hadn't spoken to Lauren even one single time. Which, he was 20 years older than her, so maybe he just wasn't the type to have his cell phone glued to his hand all the time. But that does seem like a pretty long time to not speak to your girlfriend. And when I say that David and Lauren didn't speak at all during this long weekend trip away, I mean that they didn't call or even so much as text one another the entire time that David was gone to this golfing trip in California. Hell, David didn't even know that Lauren was missing until he got back from Georgia and the police got in touch with him and said that they needed to speak to him about his missing girlfriend. David did tell police about the last email that he'd gotten from Lauren, and he even let police know that he didn't respond to this email that Lauren had sent. Even though Lauren said in this email that she thought someone had tried to break into her apartment on the night that she'd stayed at Ashley and Joe's place after they'd gotten back from having drinks. So this is like the second or third time that Lauren has mentioned to someone that she thinks that someone is going into her apartment or that someone's trying to break into her apartment. And again, it just kind of baffles me to think that David read that email and then went, meh, she'll probably be fine. Because what in the actual fuck? Why would he not respond to that? Why would he not call and just be like, hey babe, can you stay at a friend's house until I get back? And we'll go change the locks on your doors when I get home. It's that simple. Like, anything. He could have just replied in any way at all, but he didn't. And Lauren wasn't sure if this may have just been like teenagers being destructive little assholes, or if someone was actually trying to break into her place. But either way, David still saw the email at some point during his golfing trip and didn't bother to check in or email her back or anything else for that matter. Now, later on after this investigation wrapped up, I did see an article where David had said that he does believe that Lauren started the email that was sent to him, but that he isn't fully convinced that Lauren is the one who finished and sent the email, although there's no proof that I could find of that. But this case was starting to pick up media attention like crazy, and the media was covering things on this case and making things known to the public before Lauren's family was ever even made aware of what was happening. Once the torso had been found, Lauren's mom, Karen, was about to board a flight so she could help go search for Lauren, and Lauren's sister called to tell her that Lauren was likely deceased, and Lauren's sister didn't want her mom going to Georgia and, going through that alone. So Lauren's mom wasn't even made aware that the torso had been found and that DNA had confirmed that torso did belong to Lauren before it was being reported on. And by this time, there were, of course, tons of news stations packed outside of Lauren's apartment complex, and these news stations were trying to get interviews with any and everybody who was willing to speak to them. And they did just that. And I guess the news station didn't realize that the police were trying to keep it quiet about finding the torso in the dumpster, because one of the news anchors asked Lauren's neighbor, Stephen McDaniel, what he thought about the police finding a torso in the dumpster, and Stephen kind of glares off into the abyss until he finally just says, I think I need to sit down. And this interview was basically over at that point. And I want to play the audio to that interview just so you can hear it to get an idea of what I mean.
Person that was living there?
Yeah, Lauren was my neighbor. We're just trying to find out where she is at this point. I mean, no one has seen her since Saturday. I mean, the last time anyone heard from her was an email that she sent out, and no one's heard from her since.
Did you see her hang out with anyone at the time, anything like that?
I mean, no one has seen her since Saturday. I haven't seen anything. I mean, You always hear noise outside, but it's just people walking by pretty much.
And she just recently graduated from Mercer?
Yeah, she and I we were both JD students. We graduated back in May.
What kind of person was she? I mean, what did you see?
I mean, she's as nice as can be. I mean, very personable, very much a people person.
Do you know any enemies she might have had, somebody that might want to hurt her?
No, we don't know where she is. I mean, the only thing we can think is that maybe she went out running and someone snatched her. Because we went over. One of her friends had a key. We went inside and tried to see if there was anything amiss, but she had a door jamb that was sitting right by it, so there was no sign that anyone broke in. The door was locked when everyone got here. We just don't know where she is.
What about in the parking lot area? I know they've been doing a lot of. I think that's where they have recovered the body or whatever they recovered from there.
Body.
Had you seen anything there? Had you seen anything there? We don't know if this is the same person. You know what I mean? Like, they took out a body there earlier. We don't know if it's the same person or not. That's how we're trying to ask people if they know who lived there. Are you okay, sir?
I think I need to sit down.
Okay.
So as soon as this news reporter says the word body, he immediately shuts down and kind of goes into like a catatonic state. Real weird. Let's keep moving though. So we have the two most obvious suspects out of the way, the current boyfriend and the ex-boyfriend. So police start focusing on the people that also lived in the apartment complex where Lauren lived. They spoke with the maintenance man of the complex, which was likely the only other person besides Lauren who would have had a key, but the maintenance man said that he hadn't been inside of Lauren's apartment in weeks, and she had asked him to go in with her for some reason. For whatever reason. But when police asked for the maintenance guy's alibi, he of course told police that he had been in his own apartment studying because he was also prepping to take the bar exam. But everyone that lived in that apartment complex also volunteered to let police search their apartment. Even the maintenance guy agreed to let police come and look through his apartment. The maintenance guy even took police into the maintenance closet and into the laundry room to help them look around to see if there's anything that may help. And in the maintenance room, police noticed a few saws hanging up where the rest of the tools were, but there was one specific hacksaw that was hanging there that appeared to have blood on it. And the maintenance guy was absolutely certain that that hacksaw had not been there before and that he'd never seen it before. So police took it into evidence, and now at this point, everyone that lived in the apartment complex agreed to talk to police just so they could try to help in any way that they could. So, of course, police sent the hacksaw off to see if the blood on the saw matched Lauren's blood, and it did. And with the maintenance guy having a key to everyone's apartment, and with him having access to the maintenance room and its tools, he was being looked at as a pretty good suspect. But after police searched his apartment, there really wasn't anything found that was suspicious or even noteworthy. And there was only one person out of everybody that lived in that complex who was refusing to let police look through their apartments. And if you guessed it was Lauren's neighbor, Stephen McDaniel, then ding, 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 ding. You would be right, my friend. Stephen told police that maybe it was just all the law school that he'd done that made him not want to let police search his personal space. But after some time and during the interview with Stephen McDaniel, police asked Stephen about the marks on his chin. And Stephen explains that it was probably an ingrown hair or something, and once it scabbed over, he would always pick at it. So that's weird, but it happens. And during this interview, police learned that Stephen had asked Lauren out a few times over the course of the time that they'd lived in the apartment complex. And though Lauren had always declined Stephen's offers, she had always been super nice about it, and she tried really hard not to hurt his precious male ego. So after police interviewed Stephen for a while, Stephen did finally agree to walk police through his apartment with him showing them around. He just didn't want him in his apartment without him there. Now, after police get inside of Stephen's apartment, they immediately notice something strange. And this wouldn't have even been strange if Stephen knew how to keep his mouth shut. But thank God he doesn't know when to stop talking, because when police get inside of Stephen's apartment, they find a pile of unused condoms. And you're probably thinking, like, why are condoms a weird thing to find in a college student's apartment? Well, I'll tell you why. Because Stephen had just blabbed and told police all kinds of stuff that they did not need to know during the interview. That included the fact that he was a virgin and that he wanted to save his virginity until marriage. Which is fine, that's cool, great, grand, wonderful. So why in the hell would he need all these condoms? What, for practice? And it wasn't just like a box of condoms. It was like all different colors, sizes, shapes, flavors, ribbed, you name it, Stephen had it. So police asked Stephen, like, why do you need all of these condoms if you're saving yourself for marriage? And again, you can thank whoever you believe in that Stephen doesn't know when to shut his trap, because he tells police officers that he had actually stolen all these condoms from the different people's apartments who lived in the same complex as him. So he literally just told on himself about stealing shit out of other people's apartment units. Not just any apartments either. He flat out told police that he'd purposely stole a bunch of shit from other people's apartment units in the same complex where he actually lived. So police start going back and looking at interviews that were done with the news stations with people who lived in the apartment complex. And when they came across Stephen's interview that I just played, once they saw his reaction to the news that the torso had been found, this sent up some major red flags. Police went ahead and hit Stephen with a burglary warrant to be able to hold him until they could try to gather some more evidence and information on him. And now that police had a warrant for burglary, they could legally search Stephen's apartment without him being right on their heels every step of the way. And once investigators got back to Stephen's place, they found a slew of things that absolutely did not in any way, shape, or form belong to Stephen. But probably two of the biggest pieces of evidence that were found inside of Stephen's apartment was a set of keys. One was a master key to every apartment unit in that apartment complex, and the other key was a key that went solely to Lauren's apartment unit. Police also got a warrant to search Stephen's computer and his search history. And tell me why this man legit Googled how to dismember a body and how to get away with murder. They also found some other searches that are only weird because we know what happens and we know what Stephen did, but they wouldn't be weird if anyone else searched them who didn't murder and dismember a body. For example, searches for BDSM, and like I said, BDSM isn't weird until you pair it with murder and dismemberment. Investigators also found a few small things like underwear and such that presumably didn't belong to Stephen. So police want to interview Stephen again just to see if he may tell on himself about something else. But this interview was different from the other ones that they'd done with Stephen because during this entire interview, Stephen just answered every question by saying, "I don't know," and staring off into space. After a while, Stephen finally requested a lawyer and police go back to his apartment again, and this time they find the original package that the hacksaw that was covered in Lauren's blood had come in. So I guess we know where the hacksaw came from now at least. And with all of this evidence, the investigators took everything that they had to the district attorney's office to try to get an indictment on murder charges. But while they were at the district attorney's office, investigators were looking into some other videos that they'd found during their search of Stephen's shit. They also found a video that Stephen had recorded of himself holding like a selfie stick, but not a selfie stick. And in this video, you can see Stephen holding the pole up to Lauren's apartment window, and he holds the camera on the pole up to her window to be able to see in. He's a real creep. And the creepiest part about this video is that it was dated for June 25th, and the timestamp was 11:10 p.m. So that would have been the day after she'd gone out for drinks with her friends and spent the night at Ashley's and then left that morning. But that would have been later on that night after she'd left Ashley's and gone to the fast food restaurant and the pool, yada, 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 earlier that day. So it seems like Lauren was going about her normal, average, everyday life, and Stephen was just watching her constantly. This video was dated for the 25th at 11:10 p.m. And it was just a video of Lauren asleep in her bed. She probably had no idea that he was even creeping on her through her second floor apartment. Once investigators sat down with Stephen and his attorney, investigators basically laid out all the evidence that they'd gathered, and Stephen confessed almost immediately to murder, with the promise of a plea deal, of course. Stephen said during his confession that he did make the video of Lauren sleeping and that the timestamp and the date was correct. Stephen says that after he made that video that he went into Lauren's apartment wearing a mask at like 4:30 a.m. and that Lauren woke up and yelled, which just caused the two of them to kind of struggle and tussle with each other. But during that struggle, Lauren was able to get the mask off of Stephen's face and she recognized him immediately. This is when Stephen says that he forced himself on top of Lauren and strangled her to death. Stephen says that Lauren was deceased and that he took her body to the bathroom where he dismembered her in her own tub. And when police officers asked Stephen what he did with the rest of Lauren's body parts, Stephen says that he disposed of them in different dumpsters throughout the area, which is probably true because officers said that they were only there for about 30 minutes after they discovered Lauren's torso in the dumpster before trash trucks started pulling up to collect the trash cans and the dumpsters in the area for the week. So police searched all the dumpsters in that area and even searched the landfill where the trash trucks would have dumped the trash that was collected, but none of Lauren's other body parts were ever discovered. Now, this part really hurts my heart because Stephen originally was supposed to have gotten the death penalty as part of his plea deal to plead guilty for Lauren's murder, but Lauren's family requested that he get life in prison instead because Lauren didn't believe in the death penalty. Since his arrest and conviction, Stephen has filed multiple appeals to try to have his conviction overturned, and none of those have gone through, and I doubt that they ever will. This was a really hard case to cover, and if I confused you, I apologize. I tried to do it in a way where I could also remember the dates I needed to remember and what I needed to associate with those without it sounding too repetitive. If it did, I'm really sorry. With that being said, let's do a review of the week so I can go pick up my crotch goblins. This review comes from Haley Tanner 20177 and it's 5 stars and it says, the best murder podcast, I think. Some of it's cut off. I'm really sorry. The rest of it says, I'm literally addicted to listening. I start from the beginning because I like to do that. I also followed you on Instagram and Facebook. And I'm from the South in a small town in Tennessee. Keep up the great work. You're amazing. Oh, and I love what I believe is your son at the end of each podcast. That is both of my sons. You just can't tell them apart. Nobody can. It's fine. But thank you so much. I think I'll be in Tennessee soon, actually. So hit me up, girl. All right, y'all. Let's do it again. Same time, same place, next Wednesday. See you then.
That's how my mama murdered a podcast.